The 5th episode, The Betrayal, opens on Pip's progress as a student and as Herbert's friend, with his taste for the higher life evident in his want of money and furniture. Vaughan's performance and the script continue to add to the layers of Jagger's character, who is keenly observing Pip and reminds him to be more direct in his approach to asking for things, leaving not only Pip but the viewer unsure of what to make of his manner. Pip even recognises a mould of who may very well be Magwitch, certain that the convict can no longer harm him in death. The convict face moulds are even referred to as creatures instead of men, mere decorations to point at and shine occasionally. Wemmick, although still somewhat contained, is kinder to Pip in this scene, and an invite to his unusual but stylish and comfortable home leads to what I can only describe as a comfort scene, where the aged parent of Wemmick makes his first appearance. Almost completely deaf, the powerful sound of the cannon and a simple nod in his direction give him such joy, and the humour and heart of the story hidden underneath is first properly shown. The dinner scene at Jagger's home gives us an important connection to Estella's own journey in the story, where we are first introduced to the wild beast tamed, Molly, who Jaggers displays his control over at one point, and the spider, as Jaggers calls him, Bentley Drummle, the earliest example of a Chad in literature. The rivalry between Pip and Drummle is made clear almost immediately, as Drummle is indeed spider-like in appearance and personality, proving himself to be spiteful and show-offy by his physical performance as much as the dialogue that he is given. Jaggers is keen on Drummle, but in an insincere and ironic way that almost taunts the spider, and a simple exchange results in Drummle's own point backfiring, erupting the table in an argument that Drummle himself silences with an abrasive raising of his voice. The masculinity and insecurity in both Pip and Drummle is evident, and Jaggers warns Pip that bad things can only come with such a pairing. Joe's arrival and Biddy's letter are heartbreaking. It is evident but very subtle in Biddy's writing and narration of the letter that she still has much admiration for Pip. And Joe's rather clumsy effort to impress and act like a gentleman in front of Pip and Herbert are not only a failure, but bother Pip strongly, even though Herbert is polite enough to tolerate it, which is a strong sign of how Pip's look on his old life continues to bother him. It is unfortunate for Pip to make what could otherwise be a charmingly awkward moment so tense, although Joe's lack of intelligence in calling Pip Sir in front of Pocket is an understandable mistake Pip wouldn't take lightly, and Joe's guilt caused by Pip's irrational behaviour is so strong he can't even fulfill Pip's request to stay for dinner. Called back to Kent, the sly, also spiderish Orlick has since taken the role of servant at Sator's house, which Pip abruptly orders the dismissal of in the following episode. The house has not changed, and Orlick's sinister presence adds to the daunting, long hallway, almost as if he and Pip are ghosts wandering towards the stairs. What follows is a reminder of the heartbreak of the tale. As Pip's desire for his current education was fulfilled solely by his hope of winning Estella's approval, it is evident only he has changed since they last met, with Estella's mocking laughter making it clear she still recognises the boy as the simple playmate she could taunt and tease. Pip's quest for love in this very moment seems only all the more doomed to fail. The opening to the 6th episode, Herbert's Warning, is a cold reminder of Estella's character, who has either removed memories of Pip from her mind in an effort to remain heartless, or she truly cared not enough to remember, much to Pip's disappointment given this fantasy-like idea he has of the woman, in spite of the memories being nothing short of horrible, namely the time she left him food, turned her back on him like he was a beggar, and young Pip punched a brick wall with a bare fist. Havisham's admittance of wishing for Estella to be loved by Pip seems malicious, as if to humiliate Pip, but it comes from a genuine place. Havisham's strange fondness of Pip, in spite of hating the male sex, has opened her eyes somewhat, but the twisted way she raised the girl to get revenge on the male sex has irreversibly scarred her, proving Havisham's true ineptitude at achieving her goals. She almost burns herself for the first time in hysterics, but quickly calms herself on Jagger's ever so sly arrival. What follows Pip and Jagger's conversation about Havisham's night creature tendency to slip out and eat and drink when no one watches is a very strange scene where Pip's gentlemanly presence in the village causes one of the working class to bother him, mocking him and pretending to be afraid of him. This working class fellow being the son of the very same tailor who gave Pip his first gentlemanly outfit, both of which later help save Pip's life when he's captured by Orlick, before ultimately making a mockery out of him yet again in the final episode. It's a brief but effective moment that reinforces the change in Pip's life and his lack of belonging where he came from, and it builds on the ultimate message of the story. Clothing and one's place in society does not make them a gentleman. Once back in London, the episode title is fulfilled, with Herbert rather nonchalantly warning Pip and admitting he knew of Pip's admiration. The word abominable doesn't stick into Pip's mind, and it's a fine example of when one who is too stubborn to listen is set to go on, make the mistake, and hopefully learn from their own ignorance of the situation. On a brighter note, however, Pocket describes in very descriptive and joyous detail his own engagement to Miss Clara, as well as her bedridden upstairs father who bangs on the ground whenever he demands something. Pip remains enamoured, so much so he almost comically falls onto his bed after reading a letter from Estella stating he must accompany her on a coach ride to Richmond. Her own expectations are revealed to Pip, those being a woman of admiration introduced to all kinds of people. Estella's almost robotic tone throughout the scene is very effective, Pip appropriately remarking she speaks about herself as if she were someone else. Her complete lack of genuine care for herself, allowing Pip to kiss her on the cheek and suggesting he shall see her when he deems proper, suggests the woman truly has no real feeling other than to obey Havisham's wishes without a protest, as this is all she has been raised to know. A brief scene of Pip and Herbert acknowledging their building debt is immediately followed by yet another sharply written and performed scene almost exclusively between Pip and Jaggers. A fast-paced discussion about Pip's debt, his annual pension of £500 from his mysterious benefactor, and uncertainty of whether Jaggers' lawyer mentality is brought out of bitterness or fear, building tension strong enough to throw at someone until coming to a swift end. It's a sad funeral that once again draws Pip back home. As someone who lives in Essex but is constantly drawn back to my home city of London, I understand the frustration of Pip, that being constantly drawn back to the place you came from but no longer feel strongly about. After a sombre shot of the Pirrip tombstones with the coffin carrying of Mrs. Joe in the distance, Pip and Biddy have a slightly heated discussion. Many key things are discussed, such as Biddy calling him Mr. Pip in bad taste, her future as a teacher whilst still looking after Joe, and the dark tree that Orlick stood under the night Mrs. Joe died, the very same tree he is currently standing under, watching them as they discuss his discharge at Pip's doing. It's by no means a weak episode, but it does continue the story at a rather hasty pace, sprinkling several parts of the book in as much as possible. The 7th episode, Pip's Benefactor, opens on a very strong moment which demonstrates Havisham's failure to make even her own daughter love her, Pip idly watching, slowly coming to understand his pairing with Estella is not only unlikely, but may be a mistake he is too stubborn to admit. This is followed by yet another rather heartwarming scene with the aged parent, who has a simple conversation with Pip in the form of him talking and Pip nodding. Aged P is very proud of his son, commenting on Wemmick's various achievements in the legal firm. Once Wemmick returns, Aged P is even more delighted and welcomes his son by lowering the drawbridge himself, and Pip is introduced to Miss Gippins, who Wemmick is smitten by, and she appears to return the feelings, although the scene offers more humour in how she sits between the two men chatting about business, almost forgetting she is sitting there. Wemmick even makes an attempt at grasping her side, resulting in her rather calmly but sternly removing his hand before finally deciding to leave the sofa and assist Aged P in setting the table for tea. The brief but impactful dance hall scene shows us that Estella has more admiration for a man she hasn't even spoken to, this being the hovering spider Bentley Drummle, who Pip's hatred for only heightens her interest. It's a slap in the face for Pip, who has done nothing but tolerate the woman for so long, but one should remember she hasn't asked him to do so, and he brings the pain upon himself almost as much as she projects it onto him. She's more of an irritant to Pip, but he fails to see this, his hatred for and rivalry to Bentley Drummle adding fuel to the fire. It is the unexpected, for anyone who doesn't know the story, and shocking reveal of Magwitch, accompanied by the Icy Wind soundtrack as a nod back to their first meeting, who is Pip's benefactor. Pip's horror that Magwitch is his benefactor is plain to see. Perhaps it is because Magwitch, although wealthy thanks to his efforts as a convict in Australia, is still uncouth, or, as revealed by Jaggers, there is the simple fact that transportation is a life sentence, and so by returning to England, Magwitch faces certain death if he is caught. Perhaps it is because he feels so foolish assuming Havisham's involvement with not a hint of evidence beyond how everything seemed. Initially, there's no doubt that Pip is repulsed by Magwitch, and it's only through hearing the man speak he acknowledges the sacrifices the older man has made and continues to make for him, which is a key moment for Pip, who becomes much less self-centered and more focused on correcting his mistakes. Herbert continues his successful streak in being Pip's right-hand man, and agrees to help Pip help Magwitch in any way possible, but a vengeful Orlick, peering in the light of the stairwell, his shadow against the wall, is onto their plans. The 8th episode, Estella's father, continues with Pip's getting used to Magwitch, a slow process which results in the reveal of Magwitch's seemingly loose but shady ties to Miss Havisham, namely his association with the man Compeyson, who is professed to be Miss Havisham's cold-footed lover. What follows is another connection to Havisham, an equally shady one. Pip's return to Kent, where Drummle has also found himself, indirectly but very intentionally taunting Pip over his unnamed lady, although it is clear to the audience and to Pip her name is Estella. Avoiding a potential argument or physical confrontation as he already knows he has won, Drummle leaves an infuriated Pip with the eye-opening line, "Don't lose your temper, haven't you lost enough without it?" A very meaningful line, but not from the person Pip wanted to hear it from, resulting in another bare-fisted punch of the wall. Pip's confronting Estella and Miss Havisham over his answers to the mysteries surrounding his benefactor is a very strong moment where Pip, almost as if to truly get over his love for Estella, declares to her very openly how he feels, and only wishes she don't encourage or marry such a brute. In a fashion not too dissimilar to Dickens' Martin Chuzzlewit character Mercy Pecksniff, Estella proclaims she will be nothing but a curse to Drummle, despite her ill fate to be another victim of the spider's short temper, cruelness, and arrogance. Estella truly feels nothing in her heart when Pip declares his love. Havisham, almost completely distraught at this point, says almost nothing, only speaking to admit that she did in fact lead Pip on very intentionally, and he must finally accept this, walking away feeling defeated. What follows is Pip's warning from Wemmick that he is watched, presumably by Orlick, and is to be watched again. Pip is then reunited with Herbert and meets his fiancée Clara, assured Magwitch is safe upstairs, but must leave the country out of fear of being hanged. Pip once again dines with Jaggers and Wemmick, with the meal being something of an excuse for Jaggers to taunt Pip over Drummle's victory with Mrs. Bentley Drummle, going to fetch a rarer wine to toast to the toxic couple. While it may seem like a taunting, it may very well be quite the eye-opener. Jaggers' remarks are again seemingly ironic, almost as if to assure Pip that the couple are perfect for each other, and Pip has dodged a bullet by avoiding them both. It is here that Pip is given another key detail towards the identity of Estella's father. Putting together what he gathered from Magwitch and what he now knows about Molly's past as a jealous murderer, he has concluded something that only Havisham can confirm. It's a rather heartbreaking moment, where a teary-eyed Havisham, almost going senile in her madness, regrets everything she has done, taking no assurance from Pip confessing he would have loved Estella regardless of her influence. Havisham confesses she wished to raise Estella to be loved, but her spitefulness just wouldn't let her. Unable to admit her regrets through words, her tone of voice and face say it all, and the age Estella was brought to her is another piece of the puzzle Pip needed. Leaving without hesitation, Havisham becomes frantic and begs that he stay, setting herself alight with the fireplace in the process. Although desperate to save her, the woman dies from shock, declaring she forgives the girl. Injured and seemingly drunk, or high on adrenaline, Pip takes what Herbert reveals as the final confirmation. Magwitch is the father of Estella, a secret the girl can never know. The penultimate 9th episode, Retribution, is the sign of things that are to come, those being the reversals of Pip's fortunes. Drawn back to the marshes in the midst of planning Magwitch's escape by a mysterious letter, Pip is taken prisoner by Orlick, in what is a truly tense, dramatic, and slightly frightening scene first shown with the uncomfortable and trippy POVs of the strangled Pip. Orlick's truly unbalanced personality is brought to light by the dialogue and Lacey's performance. The insecurity, jealousy, and rage he all feels towards Pip is used to brush off any illness surrounding his name that is his own fault. Fortunately, Pip is spared a horrific fate when Herbert arrives with the tailor and his son, who have taken a break from taunting Pip for once. It's a rather conveniently written moment, where Pip misses the fireplace and didn't bother to make sure his letter was burned, just so Herbert could find it. It's the first sign of convenient writing in an otherwise sharp script, but it doesn't ruin the experience. What follows is the build-up to the iconic boat scene and the articulate planning and carefulness that Pip, Herbert, and Magwitch are putting into it, bringing along Startop, a character set up alongside Drummle in the 4th episode as the more agreeable classmate to Pip. In one of the more lengthy film sequences without videotape interrupting, about 2 minutes or so, the iconic boat sequence takes place, where Magwitch is foiled by Compeyson, who drowns, leaving everyone else cold and wet, and Magwitch dying of his injuries. Pip finally comes to full terms with his unfair treatment he directed towards Magwitch, acknowledging the man treated him with much more fondness than Pip ever did him or Joe, people who Pip saw as being beneath him because of their uncouth nature. In his final moments of life, Magwitch is visited by Pip, accepting the failure to escape his death. Pip reveals to Magwitch that his child is not only alive, but she is a beautiful woman Pip is in love with. Perhaps something that Pip no longer believes, but knows will make Magwitch happy to hear. The 10th and final episode, Face to Face, brings all of the events full circle in a satisfying way, with Herbert leaving for Egypt to work abroad and hopefully earn the marriage of his flame Clara. Unsure of his future, Pip is offered the role of Clark, but his uncertainty is so deep that such an offer would require 3 months for him to fully decide. It's a sad moment where the viewer is left uncertain if the two shall ever see one another again. Wemmick's desire for a holiday coincides with his marriage to Gippins, which he does in a suitably eccentric fashion, that being asking Pip to come on a walk, seeing the church and abruptly deciding to enter, remarking Gippins is also in the church, and suddenly finding a wedding ring in his pocket, with aged P as the best man. It's an empty church, with Pip simply standing further down the aisle, watching with admiration. After returning home, Pip is presented with the prospect of being sent to prison due to his mounting debts, falling unconscious with shock. After a suitably eerie and rather psychedelic dream sequence where Joe's voice is heard and various images are shown, Mrs. Joe's funeral, the hanging corpse, the mask in Jagger's office, Biddy and Estella's faces, Pip discovers he has been ill for some time, Joe at his side making sure he remains well. The two, reunited as best of friends, speak of Orlick, who robbed and humiliated Pumblechook and is now in jail, and remark on their past. What happened happened, and nothing will ever change their admiration of one another. Joe's departure is abrupt, done through a letter which encloses a cheque that will cover Pip's debt right down to the last penny. In a moment of sudden realisation, Pip writes to Herbert, claiming he shall ask Biddy to be his wife, and whatever she wants to do will determine his next decision. Pip returns to his childhood home, where he discovers his realisation of Biddy's admiration was not only far too late, but it has shifted to another. Biddy is now the new Mrs. Joe Gargery. As opposed to becoming rageful and embarrassing himself, Pip embraces the two's love for one another, declaring them a perfect match. It's truly a moment that brings the audience to tears in an all-relatable feeling of not recognising what was truly good for you until it was too late, despite it being right in front of you the whole time. His somewhat strange attitude due to the sudden heartbreak is noticeable, but the married couple leave it unquestioned, allowing him to go upstairs and simply rest in his childhood bed. Through the use of narration, some 10 years or so pass, and Pip remains a bachelor working abroad with Herbert. The script even preserves the line, "quite an old bachelor," from the original novel, and sets the audience up with the ending Dickens originally intended. Instead of meeting Estella in the ruins of Satis House, Pip takes his nephew, also named Pip, to a museum, where they encounter Estella. Oddly enough, it is her who approaches Pip and claims that she has thought of him often, as opposed to the other way around. There is a subtle moment where Estella does not answer Pip when he asks if she is happy with her remarriage following the abusive Drummel's death. Estella gives the younger Pip a kiss on the cheek, a charming way of showing the audience she regrets never returning Pip's affection and returning the kiss of the cheek that he gave her. Pip himself is rather awkward and says little throughout the scene, and young Pip even seems to be slightly afraid of her. It ends with the two simply walking away from one another on mutual terms. Estella does not apologise, Pip does not expect an apology, and they are most likely never to see each other ever again. Professor Hammond's view of the book is the direction of the original ending may border on misogyny in the use of broken Estella to salvage Pip's ego, but Regency Mod's review on WordPress.com offers an alternative reading of the choice of the original more bittersweet ending in this adaptation. This TV adaptation of Great Expectations was broadcast in the lead-up to the decriminalisation of homosexuality for men over the age of 21 in August 1967. Gary Bond, 26 at the time of filming, was a gay man who, from 1969 to 1976, would be the partner of actor Jeremy Brett. Although further research would be needed to put this case, I wonder whether the decision to not have Pip and Estella united romantically may have been a reflection not just on the sexuality of Bond himself, but the impending change of the law. Without going as far as calling it a gay reading of the novel, I wonder if these circumstances might have dictated the choice for a new, daring adaptation of Great Expectations so soon after the 1959 BBC production. More than a conventional romance between a man and a woman, Great Expectations is one of the ultimate novels of what today we might call a bromance. Pip has significant emotional attachments to 4 other men: Magwitch, Joe, Herbert Pocket, and Wemmick. Whilst the first ultimately reveals a marked father-son structure, the other 3 are brotherly relationships which all end in marriages except for Pip. Towards the end of the novel, the protagonist jocularly refers to himself as quite an old bachelor, a line that is preserved in the final episode of this adaptation. Later, as Pip leaves Estella to look once again at the exhibits, the viewer is left with an impression that time has left him with no romantic interest in any woman whatsoever. This is a really interesting view and I love it. It offers a unique angle to this already very unique adaptation, and I think it holds plenty of weight. Overall, it's a very sad but entertaining telling of the story, and it keeps you hooked throughout its 250-minute runtime.